Welcome to Healing the Spirit, a space where we awaken our creativity, deepen our connections, and remember who we are through the lens of astrology, archetypes, and art making. I'm your host, Jonathan Coe. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Healing the Spirit, and thank you for tuning in to this episode. I want to start by checking in with you. I know that the podcast is this monodirectional format, meaning I can't really hear you verbally responding to my check-in here. But yeah, I want to acknowledge that this is a tender time for so many of us. There are so many geopolitical instabilities at the time that I'm recording this. There are many other uncertainties regarding the climate, the economy, all these other areas of our lives. And I know that intellectually many of us know that the truth is things are always in flux. Nothing ever stays the same. And also, the velocity and the intensity of the changes that we're experiencing at this moment are really intense. On a day by day, maybe sometimes even hour by hour basis, I'm finding myself experiencing either my emotions and my state of being mirroring these larger forces. And I'm also finding my state of being contrasting them. And so I want to begin by reminding all of us that our experiences are valid. It can feel difficult sometimes when we are feeling resourced or when we're feeling creative or happy to affirm that in moments when everything else seems to be falling apart, quite literally. And your experiences and your existence are also part of this larger tapestry. You are part of this larger web of beings. We are all co creating what we are calling reality together. So, wherever you are when you're listening to this, whatever state you find yourself in, know that the frequency you are holding is valid. The experience you are moving through, there is nothing wrong with them. You are also a part of this great unfolding, this cycle of evolution that all of us are moving through. Which brings me to something that I want to share today. So, if you've been listening to the podcast for some time, you may have picked up on the fact that I have been knee deep in studying Buddhism and specifically Zen Buddhism. And I've been really enjoying the work of Thich Nhat Hanh. And today I want to share with you some passages from Thich Nhat Hanh's book, Awakening of the Heart, which is his commentary on some essential Buddha sutras. And for those of you who are not familiar with his work, he is a great Vietnamese Zen Buddhist monk. He passed away in 2022. And yeah, I think this text is just pure gold, honestly. And I'm finding myself so inspired and lit up every single time I return to this text. I'm going through the text pretty slowly because I just want to savor the teachings and let it truly seep into my being in my everyday life. And I'm having this experience where reading his words would just transform me in real time. And A Course in Miracles, another channeled amazing spiritual text, talk about how miracles are really shifts in perception. And this text, Awakening of the Heart, has facilitated so many perception shifts for me. So, from that vantage point, this book has brought about so many miracles into my life. And if there's anything that many of us are needing in this moment, it's really miracles, you know? And so, I want to bring to all of you some passages that have really moved my heart. And also, simultaneously, these passages have illuminated and shifted and corrected my perception, especially on the topic of impermanence. Um, yeah, I think I'm just gonna get right into it. Um, I guess before we go into the text itself, I will say that I was reading this passage when I was on the subway in New York City, where I live, and I just had tears streaming down my eyes, and it just really touched me. And so I think there's a lot of value in returning to these texts that are rooted in tradition, especially in times when everything feels like it's shifting sands, right? And a little bit of context that I find helpful as well is Thich Nhat Hanh experienced Vietnam essentially being bombed down to the ground. You know, this is not a person who is just saying things from a space of comfort. There's nothing wrong with comfort, right? Like I'm comfortable at the moment that I'm recording this, but I find it helpful to really contemplate the words and the wisdom of someone who moved through really challenging times during his life. Okay, so let me start by reading this passage for you. If we hear someone talking about impermanence, we may think we understand. But understanding impermanence is not a matter of words or concepts, but a matter of practice. Only through our daily practice of stopping and looking deeply can we experience the truth of impermanence. Impermanent does not only mean here today, gone tomorrow. The meditation on impermanence is a deep, penetrating, and wonderful path of meditation. There's no phenomenon whatsoever with a separate, lasting individuality. All things are in endless transformation, and all things are without an independent self. To be impermanent is to be without self. This is a fundamental recognition in Buddhism regarding the nature of all that exists. Breathing in, I am looking deeply at some object. Breathing out, I observe the impermanent nature of that object. The object I am observing might be a flower, a leaf, or a living being. Looking deeply this way, we can see that change is taking place in every instant. The Sanskrit word for instant is ksana, the shortest unit of time. 1 second contains many kshana. The first kind of impermanence is called kshana anitya, impermanence in every instant. When something reaches the end of a cycle of arising, duration, and cessation, there is a marked change. The second kind of impermanence is called cyclic impermanence. When we heat water, the water is getting hotter all the time. That is kshana anitya. Then suddenly we see steam. The appearance of steam is a cyclic impermanence of water. We have to look deeply at cyclic change in order to accept it as a necessary part of life and not be surprised or suffer so greatly when it occurs. We look deeply at the impermanence of our own bodies, the impermanence of the things around us, the impermanent nature of the people we love, and the impermanent nature of those who cause us to suffer. If we do not look deeply at impermanence, we may think of it as a negative aspect of life because it takes away from us the things we love. But looking deeply, we see that impermanence is neither negative nor positive. It is just impermanence. Without impermanence, life would not be possible. Without impermanence, how could we hope to transform our suffering and the suffering of our loved ones into happiness? Without impermanence, how can we hope that a tyrannical regime might become democratic? Okay, that passage really took my breath away. So let's break that down a little bit. Over the course of studying astrology, of practicing professionally and teaching, impermanence and cyclicality have been huge themes in my work. When you take up the practice of tracking the movements of the planets, tracking the subtle energetic shifts within you and around you, one thing that becomes clear over time is how nothing stays the same. Astrology is always moving, even when one planet stays in the same sign. For example, let's take the example of Saturn, right? Saturn moved into Pisces in March 2023 and stayed there until recently. Even when Saturn stayed in one sign, the flavor of Saturn in Pisces shifted as the ruler of Pisces, Jupiter, changed signs. When Saturn first moved into Pisces, Jupiter was in Aries, and that gave a specific flavor. And then Jupiter moved into Taurus and then into Gemini. And all of this happened before Saturn finally moved into Aries. And later this year, in the fall of 2025, we'll have Saturn moving back into Pisces while Jupiter is exalted in Cancer. So we can say that we really saw four different phases of Saturn in Pisces, right? The experience of Saturn being in Pisces continues to shift in its flavor because there is an inherent connection between Saturn and Jupiter because Saturn was in Jupiter's house. There's a relationship there, there is a relationality there. This inherent connection between the planets also mirror our connection with the rest of life. It mirrors our connection with one another. It mirrors our connection with the collective and with astrology itself. So, in working with clients, in talking to students, and noticing the general discourse about astrology on the internet, I noticed that a lot of people come to astrology from this place of intensely questioning themselves. People come into astrology trying to figure who they are. There's this question I hear a lot phrased in many different ways in consultations. Can you help me figure out who I am? Can you help me figure out my authentic self? Can you help me figure out why I'm experiencing suffering? And I think it's important to come back to the idea of impermanence as there's no phenomenon whatsoever with a separate lasting individuality, right? As that quote was saying, all things are in endless transformation and all things are without an independent self. To be impermanent is to be without self. Many of us, especially living in 2025, influenced deeply in ways that are insidious by Western culture, hold this idea that we are discrete selves, that we are separate from everything else. And what this passage is saying is that because everything is always changing, because everything is impermanent, the idea of the solid individual is an illusion. It's fiction. And when we map this onto the study of astrology, I think about how the birth chart is always impacted, activated, deactivated by transits. For example, to use the storyline of Saturn in Pisces, when Saturn was in Pisces, it was exactly conjoined my sun. And even though I have been a Pisces sun throughout my entire life, the experience of Saturn being on my sun colored my experience in ways that were new to me. And even though Saturn had been in Pisces before when I was much younger, it was different because the configuration of the rest of the planets are different. And so, yes, our birth chart or studying astrology can anchor us. And yet, because we are always evolving as beings, our understanding of astrology, our perspective of what our birth chart is telling us also needs to be updated continuously. We never are fully done studying our chart because we are never fully done evolving and growing as people. So, this idea that there is no independent self is not to say that we don't have unique experiences. It's not to say we don't have unique thoughts or unique bodies. On some level, we do. And also, this attachment, this obsession that we hold in our culture and in our times around asserting our individuality is something we need to investigate and something we need to question. This is something we need to look deeply into to recognize its true nature. Okay, so let's continue reading because this next part addresses this point about the connection between impermanence and the reality that everything is interdependent. So, back to the words of Thich Nhat Hanh. Impermanence also means interdependence, that there is no independent individual because everything is changing all the time. A flower is always receiving non flower elements, like water, air, and sunshine, and it's always giving something to the universe. A flower is a stream of change, and a person is also a stream of change. At every instant, there is input and output. When we look deeply at the flower, we see that it's always being born and always dying, and that it is not independent of other things. The components of the universe depend on one another for their existence. In the Majjhima Nikaya, it says, "This is because that is. This is not because that is not." Impermanence also means signlessness, the reality that all that exists is beyond every concept and linguistic expression. We cannot go directly to their essential and true nature because we're accustomed to grasping phenomena through the intermediaries of perception and thought. The categories of perception and thought are signs. The example of wave and water is often given to help us understand the signless nature of all that exists. A wave can be high or low, can arise or disappear, but the essence of the wave, water, is neither high nor low, neither arising nor disappearing. All signs, high, low, arising, disappearing, cannot touch the essence of water. We cry and laugh according to the sign, because we have not yet seen the essence. The essence is the very nature of everything that is, and it is the reality of ourselves. The essence is the very nature of everything that is, and it is the reality of ourselves. If we only see the wave with its manifestations of being born and dying, we will suffer. But if we see the water, which is the basis of the wave, and see that all the waves are returning to the water, we have nothing to fear. When we begin the practice, we want things to be permanent, and we think things have a separate self. Whenever things change, we suffer. To help us not suffer, the Buddha gave us the truths of impermanence and non-self as keys. When we look deeply at the impermanent and non-self nature of all things, we are using those keys to open the door to reality, or nirvana. Then our fears and our suffering disappear, and we do not mind whether we are young or old, or even alive or dead. We realize that we don't die in the usual sense of having existed and then ceasing to exist. We see that all of life is ongoing transformation. Breathing in, I see the nature of impermanence. Breathing out, I see the nature of impermanence. We have to practice this many times to have success in the practice. We have to practice on our own and with a community, not just during sitting meditation, but in whatever we are doing. Watering the garden, washing the dishes, walking up and down the stairs, and so on. The reality of everything that exists is its signlessness, since it is a reality that cannot be grasped by concepts and words. Because it cannot be grasped, it is called empty. Emptiness here does not mean non existent as opposed to existent. It means signless, free from all imprisonment by concepts, birth or death, existent or non existent, increasing or decreasing, pure or impure. This is developed in the 15th breathing exercise. It says in the Prajnaparamita Heart Sutra, all dharmas are marked with emptiness. They are neither produced nor destroyed, neither defiled nor immaculate, neither increasing nor decreasing. Okay, so a couple points that I want to expand here to flesh out the teachings a bit more. Essentially, what this passage is saying is impermanence and emptiness do not just point to this void nothingness. There is this idea of nothingness or the abyss that I personally used to think of in my mind when I first heard the word impermanence. I believe the first encounter I had with impermanence in the context of the Buddhist teachings was from the book When Things Fall Apart by Pema Chodron. And I remember thinking this is scary. This idea is really scary because the image I see in my mind is falling off a cliff with nothing to hold me, nothing to catch me. In my mind, I see this image of the black hole. And because that's how it's portrayed in media, in sci-fi movies, right? It invites The void invites a kind of fear, a kind of trepidation. Brynja Magnuson, who has been a guest on this podcast, wrote this book called Yin Mysticism. And in Yin Mysticism, Brynja talks about this, about how we live in a culture that villainizes yin, that doesn't understand the void. And I think this passage is such a helpful guidance for us to recenter into or reground or redefine what we think of when we think about impermanence. And there's very real consequences to thinking about impermanence as this abyss, as this void. And I see this showing up in a couple ways within spiritual communities. The first way that I see this is the void or impermanence being used to mask an underlying issue, essentially a denial of what's happening. Maybe there's a challenging emotion that is arising, and rather than using our tools to really deal with it, we kind of just toss our hands in the air and say, well, nothing lasts forever. And we use that as a way to not acknowledge, not fully touch in with the sadness and the anger or other intense emotions that we might be experiencing in our bodies. The second way that I see this impacting spiritual people is the void or impermanence being used as a response to collapsing under scrutiny. Mystical concepts and practices that we engage in are necessarily ineffable, or there are at least certain aspects of them that evade words, as Thich Nhat Hanh pointed out in that passage, right? Reality itself can't be grasped by concepts or words. And this is true. And also, sometimes words, however imperfect, however imprecise, are deeply helpful to actually communicating our experiences with others. And when we don't know how to fully articulate, we sometimes use words like the void or impermanence out of mental avoidance again. So there are two kinds of avoidances here, right? One is avoiding challenging emotions, and the other one is avoiding coming into contact with our own incomplete understanding. And in both cases, when we touch in, when we make space for our big emotions, when we make space for places where we haven't gotten to intellectual understanding in our practices, in our path, these are actually opportunities for us to open up to greater wisdom. That can come from a mentor, that can come from our practice, that can come from reality meeting us halfway. How many times have you finally admitted to yourself that you don't understand something, and then later that day, there's a synchronicity that happens in your daily reality that shows you the true nature of that which you have just admitted earlier you needed help with, right? This is reminding me of a conversation I had with Zanetta Sykes on this podcast, where Zanetta essentially said that for them, their tarot practice is really grounded in recognizing that they need help, that they come to their divination practice from the space of full humility, of fully embracing their human experience of being confused, of not knowing. And oftentimes, these are instances and moments when our practices can really help us, right? And so we can look deeply at these patterns of flight and freeze with compassion, but also with grounded realism. We can look at these patterns to recognize where we are getting in the way of truly receiving assistance from our practices, from our guides, from the world around us. Applying this into the present moment, into this time when things feel really challenging for so many of us on so many different levels, it is easy to use impermanence as yet another way to reinforce a kind of doom and gloom narrative. This is something that I've been tracking on a lot of discussions in social media, where it seems like everybody is really addicted to the concept of the world ending. It's as if everybody is now walking around with this invisible giant TV around their head playing the sci-fi worst case scenario version, the apocalypse movies, right? And this can impact all of us, even the most devoted creative mystics among us. After all, if nothing lasts forever, if there is the possibility that what we are creating now will all turn into nothing because of all the wars and the conflicts, what's the point of doing anything? In our astrology practice, it's easy to fall into this trap, right? It's easy to look at the movements of the planets and just fall into doom and gloom over everything. Similarly, in our creative practice, it's an easy posture to collapse into. What is the point of creating my work if everything is just going to shit with the world? What is the point of sharing my gifts with the world if everything is just collapsing anyways? In other words, many of us in this moment are asking, what is the point of my existence? What is the point of my work if the nature of life itself is impermanence? This is a question that we can easily set aside when everything seems okay, when we have a government that is ruled by someone we feel happy about, when the places we live in are in relative state of peace, when groceries are affordable. But when we are living in times that have a lot of pressure to them, how do we stay present with this question? This question is really valid. What is the point of our existence? What is the point of our work if everything is impermanent? And the answer is right here in this passage. Impermanence also means interdependence, that there is no independent individual because everything is changing all the time. A flower is always receiving non-flower elements like water, air, and sunshine, and it's always giving something to the universe. A flower is a stream of change, and a person is also a stream of change. If people are streams of change, then the point of your existence and your work is everything. Everything. If you're listening to this, I know that your work and your presence are here in service to transmuting something. I know that you're not just a mystic. You're not just an artist. You are an alchemist. You take something challenging and you turn it into a work of art. we all work with different modalities. When I say art, I don't just mean painting or making music, although those are obviously included as well. I mean the art of reparenting the world. I mean the art of creating space, creating moments of pause for people to look deeply into experiences that they otherwise would just pass. I mean the art of facilitating awakening. I mean the art of deconditioning. I mean the art of remembering yourself as the child of Earth herself. These are not trivial. Do you see that these are precisely the medicine that's needed in these times of upheavals? These are the art that's necessary for working with heightened fear, for working with destruction. In times of change, especially great and rapid changes, people are open. People are open to deep, deep transformations. And you don't need to overthink this either. Whether you're a professional or not, it does not matter. You can facilitate awakening when you buy your coffee in the morning, when you decide to respond with kindness to someone who said something nasty to you during your commute to work because they're having a bad day. You can facilitate deconditioning when your partner loses their temper by really taking the time to pause and look deeply into their eyes rather than reacting with the usual, how dare you, right? The war, the violence, the hatred that we are seeing play out on the larger stage is really a mirror to the dynamics that are within us, to the dynamics that we play out with one another in partnerships, in collaborations, in families, in communities. We impact one another in very real ways. Everything is connected with everything else, and nothing can ever stay the same because it's always changed and shifted through its relationships with other things around it. Earlier today, I was thinking about an example of sitting in a circle, maybe in the context of group therapy or AA meetings. For those of you who have experienced this, you know exactly what I'm talking about. When someone stands up and leaves the circle, you can feel something shifting in your body. Another example is if you've been alone in your house and suddenly your housemate comes home, you can feel them. You can feel their energy impacting your energy. You can feel yourself being shifted by them. And so everything that you are doing as a mystic, as a creative, when you work in service of transmuting something within yourself, in your immediate relationships, you are also changing the world. It might seem small to you, it might seem inconsequential, but the ripple effect of that is beyond what your mind can comprehend. Now, the work that you are doing to stay grounded, to stay connected to your spiritual guidance, to continue to interact with life from a lens of curiosity, from a lens of grounded hope, of deep faith in the intelligence of the universe. This work has never been easy, right? This work was not easy during quote unquote normal times, although at this point it's really hard to remember when it was normal. And during times of heightened change and heightened uprooting, it's even harder to do. It takes a lot more concentration, it takes a lot more energy. It costs more for us to be in that state. One of my favorite teachers, Caroline Mace, is always using this analogy of the penthouse. And I'm going to share this with all of you because I think this is a fabulous analogy. Living with awareness and consciousness is like living in the penthouse unit of a building, an apartment building. You get the big picture view. You get this fabulous perspective of the place you're living in. But the rent is high, and you have to pay that rent in order to continue living there. I find this extremely relevant for many of us right now. This is not the time to fall into despair. This is the time to look deeply. This is the time to investigate the nature of reality with sincerity, with devotion. This is the time to not fall into the illusion of the superficial. This is a time to recognize that there may be things that we don't see or we don't see fully lurking underneath the surface. This is the time to trust that you've got the necessary spiritual and creative resources to continue doing that. This is really the path of the spiritual warrior. This is the path of the creative visionary. It's not to give up when the going gets hard. It's to remember your training, to remember your tools, to remember who you are. We are in a hermit year. We are being asked, quite literally, to hold that lantern in the world that's becoming increasingly dark. This is what Thich Nhat Hanh means by honoring impermanence through living in a signless way. We use our training to not get swept away by the signs. Astrology shows us the signs. The placement of the planets shows us what time it is in the unfolding of the cosmos. And it is up to us as practitioners, as people who study and practice astrology, to use our training to not get swept away by the ebb and the tide, but rather to use our practice to get in touch with the nature of the essence of life itself. Similar to the essence of the water that Thich Nhat Hanh talked about in that passage, the essence of life itself goes way beyond the changing of the tide. I like how in that passage he talked about how we practice on our own and with community, and not just during sitting meditation, but in watering the garden, in washing the dishes, walking up and down the stairs, and I would add, in our astrology practices, in our divination practices, in every conversation that we're having with loved ones. Okay, so let's close our time today with this beautiful passage, which I think this passage is pretty straightforward, so I'm not going to add too much to it. I'm just going to read it. I think it speaks for itself. Impermanence also means aimlessness. The presence of everything that exists is not to attain a final goal. We cannot add on to the nature of all that exists, nor can we remove anything from it. True nature has no origin and no end. We do not need to seek realization outside of all that exists. In the very stuff of every Dharma, the awakened nature is already fully present. Many teachers, including those of ancient Greece and China, gave teachings on impermanence. In the Buddhist tradition, impermanence is not just a description of reality, but also an instrument for understanding. You cannot understand impermanence without understanding the teaching of interbeing or emptiness. Impermanence is the first key to unlocking the door of reality. Impermanence is a samadhi, a form of concentration. Intellectually, you may agree that things are impermanent, but you might behave as if reality were permanent. We have to train ourselves to maintain the insight of impermanence in every minute of our lives. Then we will always have wisdom and happiness. Because life and reality are impermanent, we feel insecure. I think the teaching on living deeply in the present moment is what we have to learn and practice to face feeling this insecurity. We have to handle the present moment well. We live deeply in the present moment so that in the future we will have no regrets. We are aware that we and the person in front of us are both alive. We cherish the moment and do whatever we can to make life meaningful and to make him or her happy in the moment. When I drink a glass of water, I invest 100% of myself in drinking it. You should train yourself to live every moment of your daily life like that. Hugging is a deep practice. You need to be totally present to do it correctly. When you open your arms and hold the other person, you practice 3 mindful breaths. Breathing in, I know that he is still alive in my arms. Breathing out, I feel so happy. Life becomes real at that moment. So, when I sat to receive the transmission at the beginning of the month, I was a little bit surprised when the reminder that came through for the contemplative guidance episode was joy. When I heard that, I had to do a double take. I had to check in with the guides. I was like, really? Joy in these times? And what I heard loudly and clearly was yes. This too is a time to find joy because joy is our true nature. This too is a time to find connection because this connection that we have to ourselves, to other people, to all that is our true essence. This is a time to cherish our creativity because our creativity is our true essence. So, wherever you find yourself in this moment, I hope you take the time to really be present. Practice transcends our meditation practice. Our meditation practices certainly help us, and also practice is in every single second of your life. How would you be if you practice being present with yourself? Being present with your breath, with your body, with the work that brings you joy or relief or peace or success. Who would you be if you are present with your loved ones, with the people that you care about, the people who care about you? Who would you be when you stay present with your animal companions, playing with them, allowing them to sleep on your lap? Who would you be if you were present with your plants, with your home, with the places that you live in, with the land that you live on, with your neighbors, with your neighborhood, with the people in your city and your town, the ones that you adore, the ones you can't stand, the ones you admire, the ones that you feel disgusted by? What would happen if we, as people of the earth, are present with people in our countries, people that we agree with politically, religiously, people that we deeply disagree with? What if we are present with the people we think should rule and with the people that we don't think should rule? We are all in this together. Truly, we are one giant family who's fighting all the time. But we are one giant family. All right. That's all that I have for you. I hope that you continue to walk your path with devotion, with integrity, and I hope that you continue to shine your light wherever you may find yourself. I look forward to the next time that we gather again, and until then, I am sending you so much love. Take care.